thank you so much for coming. This is a super special occasion for not only the family, but for the community. This place used to be a gathering spot for everybody here in Caro and in the surrounding areas, and we hope to someday get it back to that. Baby steps, it's been a lot of work, but we're here, we're at this point, and I just wanted to thank each and every one of you for coming. Means a lot to the family, and we have a really cool presentation, and then we'll open it up for cool checkings. So I'd like to introduce Todd Walsh from the State Historic Preservation Office. Todd, huge part in this happening, so
good morning, everyone. Thank you to the Moore family for having me and having Chabot be here to celebrate this day with you. I would like to extend my thanks and appreciation for all that. I also want to acknowledge one of my Chabot colleagues, Nathan Niedering, who was really the primary reviewer for the Morehouse nomination. He did an excellent job as always, and he could not be here today, so I'm here instead. I also want to acknowledge Haley Schreiber. She is our Community Preservation Coordinator and from the Caro area, so please say hi to her.
Oh, no way. I didn't know that.
I also want to acknowledge the State Historic Preservation Review Board. I don't think any of them are here today, but they are an important part in this process. They are part of the overall National Register nomination process. They are a group of people from across the state, a group of 9 members who are appointed by the governor with expertise in a variety of disciplines, from history to archaeology to architecture. Not only does the nomination come through us, but it goes to them, and then before it goes on to Washington, D.C. So I want to just acknowledge their role in this too. I don't have much to say today. Sherry's going to give us a great presentation, so I will turn it over to her, but I just want to say that this is a fantastic place. I can speak for everyone in the process who saw the nomination, who saw the photos. Our first reaction was, wow, this was incredible, and it's great to be here to share this with you all. Thank you very much. I forgot, I have to introduce Sherry. Sherry Skidronsky is the founding principal of the Firefly Preservation Consulting. Firefly's goal is to help communities identify and preserve their historic resources, from high-style homes, such as this, to gritty agricultural landscapes, and to foster community camaraderie, around a shared sense of place. She has a Master of Arts in Public History and Historic Preservation from Middle Tennessee State University. Prior to founding Firefly, she worked as an educator and tour guide at museums and historic sites in Tennessee and North Carolina, and was the executive director of a preservation nonprofit. In nearly 15 years of consulting, Sherry has authored or co-authored over 30 National Register of Historic Places nominations, over a dozen architectural surveys, and a number of historic tax credit applications, Section 106 reviews, local historic district design standards, property histories, and preservation plans. Sherry prepared the National Register nomination for the Morehouse in 2023, and it was listed in the National Register of Historic Places this past March. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. I am absolutely delighted to share in this day and share what I have learned about this property with all of you. I assume many of you know something about it, and that's why you're here, although some of you may not have been here before and have natural curiosity about this beautiful place. So just a little personal information about me. I came up here from Chelsea. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I was a zookeeper in Nashville, which is why I went to college in Tennessee. Zookeeping is a whole other presentation. We'll talk about that another time. Then I went to North Carolina, did a number of preservation-y things there, and then my husband is from Bel Air, over by Traverse City. He went to the University of Michigan. We now live outside Ann Arbor. So that is the natural course of things. We have 2 littles. One is 9, 2 boys, one 9 and one 4, almost 5. And so it's kind of nice to get out of the house and hang out with some adults today. So again, thanks for being here. I did write the nomination for this. It is one of my favorites that I've ever written. I went a little off script at the State Review Board because I was so excited about it. They thoroughly enjoyed it. I think, like Todd said, everybody's just kind of blown away by this place. So I'm going to talk first about the National Register program, and then I will talk about sort of the specifics of this nomination and why this property was eligible to the National Register, even though, of course, it's obvious that it would be. And then there are some areas that will be open to tour today and other areas will not. So some of those places that are not open, I'm going to do a quick little virtual tour so that you can get a sense of the rest of the property. So we'll start with just talking about the National Register for a minute. Go ahead. There are lots of types of historic designations, and it can get really confusing if you aren't doing this every day for a living. So we're going to talk about the National Register pretty in depth right now. This is an honorary designation. This is the one for this property. Local historic districts and local landmarks are where you get into the regulation. They tend to be zoning overlays. They often have some kind of tax benefit. They are very property owner driven, and they are the regulatory ones. The National Register is not. That is honorary. Plaques and historical markers tend to be informational, and so these can be from a local historical society or preservation group. It can be a state historic marker, but their purpose tends to be to share some piece of interesting or important local or state history. So the National Register was created by the Historic Preservation Act of 1966. It is intended to be the nation's official list of properties worthy of long-term preservation. Interestingly, that's the goal of it. However, it doesn't come with any protections. So it's really an awareness program rather than a protection program. The Preservation Act created a state historic preservation office in all 50 states. There are also tribal historic preservation offices for tribal lands. And there is a state historic preservation officer appointed usually by the governor or a tribal officer. And so those are the groups that administer the National Register program on behalf of the National Park Service. We'll get into eligibility a little more, but generally it has to be 50 years old to be considered historic. This is where people ask me if they are historic. Yes, many of you may be. Just buildings go on the National Register, so don't worry about it. And any member of the public may submit a National Register nomination. Often people hire a consultant like me, but you don't have to. You can do it yourself, and the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service are required to consider that nomination. So eligibility. Like I said, it has to be 50 years old or older, which is actually not that old. Right now we're starting to list things from the 70s. So ranch houses, ranch neighborhoods that, right? Exactly. Everyone's giggling. Yeah, those are historic and important, and they represent an important phase of architecture through time, right? Very different from the craftsman houses that came before them. So while we think of those things as just part of our everyday life, we're up to 1974 now. So we consider integrity. So location, obviously, is it in the same place? Setting. So here we're in sort of a small town setting. It might be a big city setting. It might be an agricultural setting. Is the setting today the same as historically? Design, materials, and workmanship really speak to the architecture. And does it convey how it was built in the first place? And then feeling and association. Can you look at that building or structure or object and understand what it is and how it was used and why it was put there? And so all of those questions are how we convey significance. So we know that a property it's a farm, so it's important for agriculture. Well, does it have outbuildings that tell you the story of that agriculture? Does it convey its significance? And things can be listed individually, as this property was. They could be a historic district, which I think we're all familiar with, or it can be thematic. And a couple of examples of that would be there's a thematic nomination for bridges, historic bridges in Michigan. We have a few of those. There's, I'm working on one now that's agricultural properties within a certain township north of Ann Arbor. So it's all of the historic farms and churches and community buildings within that boundary. So it has a specific geographic area, and all of those properties are tied together some way. So we nominate things under one of these 4 criteria. And then within that, we have the areas of significance, which is basically a topic in history. So criterion A is an event that demonstrates broad patterns in history. So these are things like agriculture, education, civil rights, social history, transportation. I'm trying to think of what I've done recently. And so it fits within this broader picture of education locally or education statewide. And so that's how you're thinking about the importance of that property. Criterion B is association with a historically significant person. These are very uncommon. They tend to be associated with that person's productive life. And so it might be the studio for an important artist. It might be the office of an important architect, things like that. Criterion C is for design or construction. So this tends to be architecture or engineering. And criterion D is archaeological potential. And so these are not necessarily properties that have had an archaeological study and have had, are an active dig site or something like that, but that we know could yield information. So an indigenous burial mound. We sure don't want to dig that up. But we know that it would yield important archaeological information. I don't do these. I'm not an archaeologist. There's often a lot of confusion about what the National Register is and is not, so we'll just run down through these real quick. I've already mentioned it's honorary, not regulatory. It does help determine eligibility for state and federal financial incentive programs, specifically tax credits. And with that, there are rules that you have to follow and things you have to get approved by both the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service. However, you don't have to do those if you don't want to. So if you want to expose the brick in your shop downtown, you can't get tax credits for that, but you are certainly welcome to do so. It looks pretty cute. So it allows a community to use the listing as a tool for marketing and tourism, right? Come down to our National Register Historic District downtown and visit our restaurants and our retail stores and see how cute it is, and we have bands on Friday nights, that kind of thing. However, it does not require or permit public access in any way. So this house is now on the National Register, and we can all say we have the beautiful National Register listed Moore House in downtown Caro, but nobody can walk up to the door and expect to be let in or peek in the windows or anything like that. It triggers Section 106 review. This is when federal funding or permitting is used. You have to consider the impact on National Register eligible properties. So if DOT is widening a road, someone like me has to go out and figure out if there are historic properties that would be eligible to the National Register or have already been listed and how that project will affect them. It doesn't necessarily stop the project. In fact, it almost never stops the project, but there is usually some kind of give and take. And often there's some other project that comes out of it. So we're going to lose this resource over here, but we're going to do a historic district here. We're going to rehab a building over here. We're going to do oral histories or study something. So there's some kind of give and take with that. And it's a really technical document, has specific requirements. I am a historian. I make arguments. That's what I do. Don't tell my husband I said that. I don't need him having that ammunition, but I argue. That's what I do. So it's not the history of everything. There are a lot of really cool things about this property that I could not include in the National Register nomination because it didn't support my arguments for significance. The bonus is I get to tell you guys those stories today. So I want to explain how this property is eligible for listing. and its areas of significance, tell you some stories. We'll start with just some information about William Moore, just a little bit of background. Here he is, this dapper fellow. And that's the fireplace in the living room. Y'all will see that in a little bit. William James Moore, born in Ontario in 1870. His father was a lumberman, so they moved to Sandusky in 1875. He studied accountancy at the International Business College in Saginaw. He graduated in 1889 and then attended Oberlin College in Ohio from 89 to 90. And he married Lovila Wooley in 1896. And so that's the name of this property, the William J. and Lovila Wooley House. Elisha Gray, that name may sound familiar to you. He was an inventor of one of the first telephones, and there's some argument as to whether he or Alexander Graham Bell won and whose patent went in the stack in which order. And so cousins to William Moore, and became very close and became a mentor to him. And I want to read you this quote. Moore said this about Elisha Gray. My cousin aroused in me an intense curiosity about telephones. Before I was through college, I had devoted much of my spare time to inventing telephone devices. So while he was at Oberlin, he developed a telephone transmitter, which he patented in 1897. And then he developed a switchboard to go with it. And then he used those designs to start a phone manufacturing company and a phone company. And so brought the first phone service to the Thumb region of Michigan. So it started with his hometown of Sandusky, of course, in 1892. And he expanded to Marlette in 1894. And then the folks in Caro convinced him to come here instead, and so he left Sandusky, closed that office, and came here in 1896. This is a picture of the Caro office, which is a couple blocks over. That's on Montague Avenue, and is still standing, and there's or part of it's still standing, and there's a plaque to Moore and the telephone company on the building. He and Lovila originally lived above the phone company, and then they moved to this property in 1914. So this property was listed under 3 areas of significance: architecture, engineering, and recreation. So I'm just going to go through each of these. We'll look at a whole bunch of historic photos that I hope y'all will enjoy, and we will start with architecture. So obviously, this is a Tudor Revival style house, but what makes it particularly important is this faux thatched roof, these rolled eaves. It's sometimes called storybook Tudor Revival, or sometimes English cottage Tudor Revival. And it's the only one we know of in the Thumb. We know of a few over on the other side of the Lower Peninsula. We know of a few down in the southeastern part. But this is the only one over here, and one of very few in the state of Michigan. So the house and carriage house were first built in 1868, we think, 1868-ish. And I think they were probably updated maybe in the 1880s or so. A lot of this detailing is very Queen Anne, which 1868 would have been a little early for. So the turned post you see on the porch and sort of all of the delicate woodwork was probably added a little bit later, but the form of the house has stayed pretty much the same over time. This is the carriage house in 1917. It too has remained largely the same in terms of the form and shape of the building. This is the property in 1920. And the renovations began in 1923. It took 4 years to complete, which is not really a surprise. And this is while it's under renovation. Kelly was a local builder, and that is him and his crew. He has a sign on the house. Moore designed these renovations himself. Everyone that he hired was local carpenters, plumber, electrician, metal worker. You guys will see a lot of wrought iron around here today. So they hired a local metal worker to do all of that. And like I said, it's a very English-inspired subtype of Tudor revival. It's not entirely clear how that got here. More was certainly learning about Europe and potentially English architecture. He brought a car over very, very early in the late 19th century. And so he may have experienced some English architecture through that process. He may have gone to other parts of the state and seen some version of this type of Tudor revival. It's really not clear where it came from, but we're sure glad he did. I'm going to show you just a few photos over time, because I think one of the things that's really remarkable about this property is how little it has changed. So the previous picture was 1927. This is the carriage house and garage, also in 1927. This one's 1935. This one's 1939. You can tell by the car, this one's 1963. And of course, this is today. Well, not today, last June when I took this picture. But so the reason we listed this house for architecture is because in addition to being so distinctive, it exemplifies the Tudor revival style. So it has this front gabled form, a really prominent tapered stone chimney there on the facade. It has then the flared and rolled eaves that we see. The flared eaves are very common in Tudor revival. Rolled eaves, not so much. Dormers are a Tudor revival thing too, and they have these 3-bay dormers on both the north and the south sides of the house. Multi-light windows, often diamond paned, but in this case they're square or rectangular. Lots of different shapes and sizes of windows and doors, but they all have this characteristic peaked drip molding. And so much stone. So much stone. Stonework everywhere. And then the carriage house garage also mimics those same features with the rolled eaves and the faux thatched roof and all of the stonework. It already had dormers, so they kept those, and so it was part of that 4-year long renovation to bring it to look how it does today. I'm not going to show a lot of interior photos here because you guys will see a lot of that, but I did want to say that the interior is also remarkably intact. Often the exterior of a building will be very historic and intact, and the inside will have been changed dramatically. Not the case here. This is the living room, which you will see. So that was 1927, and this is today. So the floors, the interior woodwork, the stonework, the wrought iron that you guys will see, all of that is historic material. It's just incredibly impressive to see how unchanged the inside of this house is. All right, so we'll move on to engineering, obviously, engineering. And sort of so what he was an engineer. The house and carriage house both were fitted with like a variety of these electronic conveniences that are so creative. Many I wish I had in my house now. And so early for William Moore's time, all designed by him and built by him and installed by him. And eventually, many of those are still in place. And so the house ended up sort of becoming like a showroom, almost like come and see it in action and I'm going to convince you to buy it. And so you guys are going to see the coolest stuff in here, but I'm going to give you a little taste of it now. So we'll start with telephones, of course. There were as many as 23 phones in the house at one time. Almost all of them had their own phone number. They were listed individually in the directory. So as you looked in the directory under the Moore House, you would see the living room and the kitchen and the everything. This is looking at underneath the dining room table, which you will get to see. He had created these little cradles. There were 2 phones in here. They were set on these little cradles at each end of the dining room table. And the wires went through the table and down through the floor to the basement, and that's where the hookups were. So just incredibly creative stuff. And when I say there were phones everywhere, I mean everywhere. This is the upstairs bathroom. You can see the phone there on the left. I have small kids. I thought I never got a moment's peace. This is crazy. These are push-button controls to operate motorized hinges on the doors that you'll see on the south side of the house and inside as well. There were many options for timing. So you could open the door long enough for 1 visitor, a couple of visitors, or leave them open indefinitely. Or, as Moore described, for salesmen, truculent folk, and enemies, a special button flips the door impudently open, then snaps it like a whip in their faces. So remember when I said there are things I want in my house? And there were similar door mechanisms in the carriage house garage too. This is an elevator. That picture on the right is awfully dark, I apologize, but you'll see it in person inside. It was barely big enough to fit a person, but there's firewood storage in the basement, and you can access the elevator there and bring your firewood up to the first floor fireplaces. A thing I wish I had when I was a kid. There are indicator light panels all throughout the house. You'll see many of those today too. They were a series of multicolored lights that would tell you if lights were left on. I have small kids, that would be great. If doors were opened, if the swimming pool equipment wasn't working, all kinds of information, wherever you happened to be sitting in the house, because you'll see these in almost every room. There's a master radio room in the house, and so the rooms all have this little control panel, and you could choose to hook up to the radio. So this is like the first Alexa, basically. There is a burglar alarm hidden in the wall of the entry hall here. It could be set to trigger wherever you wanted it to. So you could pick the windows and doors that you wanted it to trigger for. It would turn on all the lights in the house, all the lights in the carriage house, all of the lights on the grounds. You could choose to have it sound an alarm, like a horn. It would light up the location of the intrusion on those light panels, and it called the police for you. I mean, he did own the phone company, so. I mean, this is remarkably forward-thinking. Burglar alarms were invented, the very first ones, in the mid-19th century, but they were not common until the late 20th century. So this is very, very early, very forward-thinking. And he would invite people to come and see it, but was careful about what he showed them, because you don't want to give away the secrets of your burglar alarm. So his advertisements for this are actually really interesting. There are also gadgets sort of all over the grounds. This is some of the pool equipment. The water from the pool was heated. It was pumped through this equipment that's sort of under the rock garden over there, and they heated the pool that way. I don't know how effective it is, because that's a real big pool, but it would be nice in Michigan to have a heated pool in the 20s, right? There were over 20 light posts all over the grounds. We can see one right there. They're Martin bird houses, and they have the light fixture kind of hidden underneath. So with the intention, of course, of just making them more pretty. And then this one on the right-hand side is over there by the pool. So the pool could be lit up for nighttime swimming parties. There was an extensive irrigation system. One of the sprinklers is poking up right over there by the fountain. And so that pulled water from the pool to keep all of these flower gardens watered. And this is a metal pressure plate. These are under both driveways. There's the driveway here, of course, but there's one to Pearl Street as well. And these were installed in the 20s, and it's an automatic garage door opener. So when you pulled in the driveway, the garage doors opened. I mean, it probably worked better than my garage door opener does, but again, so forward thinking. The garage door openers that we use today weren't invented until the 30s, and they weren't common until the 70s. So just incredible, creative, practical creations that he has here. And I saved my favorite for last. This is the zipline trapeze. It connected from the balcony that's over the porte cochere here on the south side of the house. And you could hang on to the trapeze under the airplane, leap from the balcony, drop into the pool, and when you were done, you could just hang on and ride back up again. One of the things that I've been doing for a lot of projects is sort of crowdsourcing community memories on Facebook. And so I did that with this project. Many of you may have answered me. And a lot of people said, oh, I did that once. And other people said, oh, no way, no, hard pass. So it was just really interesting to see. This is one of the most memorable in terms of what the community remembers of this property. It was this and full-size candy bars at Halloween. So that is William Moore at a spry 79 years old, demonstrating the trapeze. The airplane is still here. When I was here last, it was in the garage. Okay. And I love this quote. Moore was describing his daily use of this contraption to the Detroit News. And he said, I take my short plunge between 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning, having friends with me when I can get them out at that early hour. After such a plunge, one feels as rugged as an oak the rest of the day. This is the main control panel, so all of the cool gadgets and gizmos that I've just shown you can all be controlled from this control panel. It's in the side hall. You will be able to see it today. And it is set in a custom-built cabinet. And what you see here, close up on the right-hand side, are very, very, very extensive and detailed instructions for what gets turned on when and what gets turned off when and how to not mess it up. So I think people were probably grateful for that step-by-step instruction list. And last, the property was listed for significance in recreation and entertainment. So again, sort of the so what that we're thinking about. Lots of places are gathering places. This place with the pool, there was a dance hall in the second story of the garage, the tennis courts, all of these gardens. The Moores were really well known for hosting swimming parties and dancing parties and dinner parties. And they gave tours from time to time, and they hosted local organizations and organizations from further abroad. So it was a really important gathering space for Caro, certainly in the 20s till maybe the 50s or so. The tennis court that we are sitting on right now was installed in 1914. This is a 1919 picture of it. You can see all of those birdhouse lights, so they could play tennis at night. And this was actually installed right after they bought the property and before they actually moved into the house. So I don't know, they just really like tennis? I don't know. This is looking the other direction, so you can see it's basically this whole yard right here. The probably most obvious feature is the swimming pool. So that was built in 1917. It ended up being one of the only opportunities for public swimming in Caro in the early 20th century. By the mid 20th century, 50s, 60s, 70s, public pools were becoming a lot more common. But before that, it just really wasn't a thing. So Members of the public could come pay a small fee, a couple of days a week, a few hours a day, to come and swim in the pool. People sometimes would pay. William Moore would sit right in the driveway as pool goers came in, and he would greet them, and they'd give them the loose change, and he would make sure that everybody behaved in the pool. And the funds were used in part for pool maintenance. That thing's expensive, it's huge. And then part of those funds were actually put aside to help build the first public pool here too. And then I've mentioned the night swimming parties, and so this is the pool lit up at night. And one of the things I really love is, I mean, we live in Michigan, right? It gets cold. And when the pool froze, they just had ice skating parties instead. This is the pool in the 60s. And one of the things I heard a lot from community members was remembering coming here when the Vaughns were here in the 60s and 70s and doing chores for Mrs. Vaughn to earn swimming time. So they would rake some leaves or do some dusting or trim the bushes or something like that, and that's how they would earn their swimming time. One of the remarkable things about this pool is how big it is, especially for a residential pool, especially for a pool in the Midwest. We have a very short swimming season comparatively, so a pool as large as this is really pretty amazing. A few stats for you. It's about 109 feet long, 45 feet wide, 7 feet deep at the deepest, covers about 1/10 of an acre, and holds over 250,000 gallons of water. This is why I question how well the heater worked. The landscaping is really interesting too. When you look at some of the historic photos, there aren't a lot of mature trees in them, and obviously there are now. These were planted as mature trees, not as seedlings by the Boers. And so, of course, Moore designed a contraption to do that with, and this is it here. So they took this out into the woods, pulled up a tree. It was pulled by horses back to the property. And then here they are planting one of them over by that's the carriage house, and then the pool has just been installed. These pictures are from 1917. Lots and lots of gardens. This is the aquatic garden, I think around 1917, and that is the next to the swimming pool, between the pool and the rock garden over here. This is right over here, that's that fountain, looking into what they called the wild garden. And this is another view of that and an explanation as to why they called it that. This is the rock garden. This picture is from 1950, but it was built in 1931. So that's over here. I've referenced it a few times. And the story is that William Moore gathered stones from all of the counties in the Thumb to build that. So those stones have a lot of meaning to him and are very grounding in that, you know, being from this area. The carriage house garage is also an important part of the recreation entertainment significance. It was renovated in the 20s. You'll see this in the right in front of the door on the ground. It says Private Club and Garage of W.J. Moore. And the first floor was the garage part, of course, and it could accommodate as many as 15 automobiles. And Moore had a relatively famous collection of cars. And as I said earlier, he brought the first car to the Thumb region in 1899 and then sort of continued to build a collection. I think I'd get in trouble with the family if I didn't mention this car. But it's really, really cool. This is a 1915 Model 51 Cadillac. William Moore designed the body himself. It was built by the Kimball Company in Chicago. This is Mr. Moore enjoying his fancy vehicle. And it was very fancy. It had swivel seats, The rear seat that he's sitting in could be laid flat to be used as a bed. It had a small refrigerator where you could do food and drinks, of course, but it also would air condition the car if you needed. It had an alarm, of course, and you can see here in the back corner, a telephone. So this is one of the, or maybe the first portable car phones. And what he could do was to basically pull over and connect it to a telephone pole, and he could have a phone. He couldn't use it while he was driving. He had to pull over, but you know, baby steps. So just, again, really innovative, practical, creative, quite comfortable, sort of an early RV, basically. And his car collection got enough attention that the Veteran Motor Car Club of America had a meeting here. They did a parade in Midland, and then they all came here the next day and had tours of the property and saw his collection and saw his Cadillac. And so this is one of really many groups that were hosted here. Local garden clubs came, political clubs came, and they would hold their meetings here and tour the property. So I hope I've convinced you that it's interesting and important. I'm going to give you a little virtual tour of the places that you will not be able to tour today. You'll be able to do most of the first floor of the house. So we'll start on the second floor. The banister, the newel posts, and the floors, the woodwork, all of that upstairs is original and quite lovely. The bedrooms are pretty modest, especially compared to the rest of the property. They don't have elaborate crown molding, they don't have elaborate door and window surrounds, they don't have wainscot or anything like that. They're very simply decorated. Bedrooms on the south side of the house have these double doors that lead out to the balcony over the porte cochere. And this is just looking at that the other way, so you can kind of see how that balcony is configured. The balcony extends over the porte cochere and overlooks the swimming pool. And over there on the right is where you could hop on that trapeze if you wanted to. Again, very simple window and door surrounds. Just very modest compared to the rest of the house. This is the upstairs bathroom that I showed you the historic photo of with the telephone. And you can see the fireplace surround and a lot of that tile work all remains intact. It's a very cool room. There's a really lovely leaded and stained glass window that leads from sort of that second floor center hall up to the third floor. And the third floor is an unfinished attic. One of the really interesting things about this is it has some 19th century surprises. So this is the back bedroom. It was the maid's bedroom. So the wing that pokes out of the far corner there is the kitchen on the first floor and the maid's room, back bedroom on the second floor. So that's this room. And when you, if you look at the window and door surrounds, those are very 19th century. The window surrounds with the bullseye corner blocks and that 5-panel wood door, these are probably original to the house from either from when it was built or from that Queen Anne sort of update that I think happened. And it makes sense that they wouldn't update the maid's bedroom like they did the rest of the house. But it leaves us with this little treasure trove of finishes that are from the earlier period of the house. And here's another one. This one was my favorite. I don't even know how we caught it when Steve was showing me around the house. These are the back stairs from that back bedroom down to the kitchen. And of course they're not fancy or adorned in any way. It's just an enclosed stair. And on the turn, there's just this little bitty bit of beadboard sticking out. And that is a 19th century finish, not a 1920s finish. So there are just little bits and pieces of those earlier materials that are poking out through the house. And here's a look at the kitchen. This was updated in the 80s. So many wires in the basement, y'all. The basement is unfinished, but it has rooms for firewood and laundry and all of the usual things we have in our basements, right? But so many wires where everything came down into the basement to be connected. And I think it's an ongoing game to sort of figure out what everything went to. There's a wine cellar and a wine press, and also this is a really great look at that stone foundation. There's a valuables safe down there, and I know it seems pretty obvious, but I sort of pushed on that door when we were down there. It is so, so, so heavy. And then this is that space on the second floor of the carriage house and garage. This is that sort of entertainment space. So it's basically just one big open room with this little stage at the front, and they could do plays, have bands, have dances. This is looking the other direction. The high school basketball team played here for a while before the gym was built in the 50s. I think it was mostly the girls' team that played here. The ceiling was much higher. This is one of those great questions that Nathan had when he reviewed it. How in the world did they play basketball in there? But the ceiling used to be higher. And then running down each side of that room on the north and south sides of the building, there are all of these little rooms that were dressing rooms, changing rooms for using the swimming pool. And then down in the basement, this is one of my favorite parts. There are also these changing stalls down in the basement. So we do have time for some Q&A. One thing I want to say first, though, I have already mentioned sort of the remarkable preservation that we're seeing here. And so I think all of us, if not before, hopefully now understand really how special this property is. And so I'd really like to recognize the Moores and the Vaughns for just their incredible care for this property over time. You will see more when you tour the house and grounds, and those families understood not only the importance of the people who lived here, but the importance of the buildings, and not only the importance of the buildings, but the importance of the grounds. And I can tell you, and Todd and Haley can certainly agree with me, that in our field of preservation, those of us who do this for a living and see these things every day, this level of preservation in a private home is just unheard of. It just doesn't happen. People make updates and changes and put your own taste in it. And then when you think about too how complex this property is, how expensive that pool is to upkeep, and how expensive the roof is to redo, and just the constant work that goes into it. My house is far simpler than this, and I feel like it's never done, right? And so just the energy and the commitment that goes into preserving a property like this, I just really want to commend both the Moores and the Vaughns, and now you and Becky, for just the really beautiful work you're doing here. So please help me. Did I mention I really like this property? So we can do some quick Q&A. If you are in the sun and want to walk away, I won't be offended. But if anybody has any questions, I would be glad to answer them. Go ahead.
Were there only two families that lived here?
The question is, were there only two families that lived here? There were families before 1914 when the Moores bought the property, here for a short time. And then I think in between the Vaughns and our current owners, there were one or two as well, but again, here for a very short time. Any other questions? Yes.
Did Mr. Moore ever sleep?
The question is, did Mr. Moore ever sleep? With 23 phones, I doubt it. That's a great question. Yeah, he must have been so busy, and he did have help. So he didn't do it all himself. I can't imagine weeding this, for example, right? So he did have help, but yeah, it's amazing. And all of the things that he was engineering at the same time and running the phone company and all of the things that were happening. Yeah, very impressive.
Do we know anything about his wife?
I only know a little bit about her. The focus of the nomination is on the gadgets and the engineering, so it focuses a lot on him. I know that she too was born in Ontario. They had 5 kids, 4 of them survived to adulthood. Their son took over the property. Lovila died fairly young, and he remarried. There was sort of a period of time after her death where all of the parties stopped. Like, he did not want to see anybody or do anything. And then you see, because the parties were often reported in the society pages, and so you see these articles about after a long absence, they're having another party, and they mention the guests, and then a few months later, he marries one of them. So he did remarry, and I, like I said, I don't know a lot about her either, but yeah, because our nomination really focused on the engineering and the architecture in his designs. But I made sure to put her name in the name of the house.
There you go.
In the back.
Nobody lives here now.
Oh, are you guys here full time?
Yeah.
They do. Yeah. Steve and Becky live here full time.
Great-great-grandson.
Oh, yes. Right? Great-great?
Great.
Grandson. Owns it now, yes, of William Moore. Mm-hmm.
Who was your father?
My father wasn't a Moore. My grandfather was Jerry Moore.
Oh, Jerry, okay.
And did you have a question?
Yes, was the garden just always surrounded by a hedge, or was there fencing?
Oh, that's a great question. The question is, was the garden always surrounded by hedges, or was there fencing? In some of the historic photos, and parts of this remain, you'll see at the corners, there are stone pillars, tapered stone pillars. There's one right here with a planter on top. And so those were installed around 1920, maybe during the renovation. It's hard to tell from the sort of gaps in photos that we have. And then there was like a stone wall that went between those. And when all of that came down, I'm not sure. The pillars still remain, though. You didn't want anyone sneaking into the pool.
I think there's some Lovila relatives here right now. I wonder if they could raise their
Yes. There is suspicion we have Lovila relatives here. Could y'all raise a hand? Yes, lovely. Thank you for coming.
I just want to add a fact that's one of my favorites coming from the city. At times,
Let me give you this.
Oh, I don't.
But it'll pick up on the video.
So there's a fact that I want to add, just coming from the city, that's my favorite when I was seeing this process. Before we had the wells and everything, occasionally the fire department would have to drain the pool to fight fires. So when I found that out, just coming from the city, I thought that's my favorite fact, that we had to drain the pool to fight fires occasionally. So.
Yeah, that started, one of the hotels caught fire, and the fire department exhausted the city water supply, and so they came over here and drained the pool. They did not save the building, but they did their best. And so after that, they sort of made a deal with William Moore that they could do that. And if you go out to the sidewalk and walk down from the driveway just a little bit, you will see in the right-of-way the access point for the fire department to access the pool water without traipsing through the gardens. Any other questions? Well, I'm going to hang around here. If anybody wants to come and look more closely at any of the historic photos or virtual tour photos, or if you have other questions, The family is going to come and give some directions for touring the property.
Wow. Thank you so much, Sherry, for all of your insight and your help in getting this done. It's just been, and Todd and Haley, thank you so much for being here too. Oh.
Is it turned off?
No.
Nope, just put it
Have to
closer.
talk loud.
Now it's
Um,
off. It's off.
Tammy, or TJ, come on up. We are the great-granddaughters of W.J. Moore. So on behalf of the Moore estate, we would like to thank you for being here. It means a lot to us. Also want to thank the Bonds for really taking care of this house in such a way that we were able to get this designation. They were in the house for 50 years. Also want to thank Steve and Becky for bringing it back into the family and carrying it on for all of us.
So at this time then, we're going to open up the grounds just for self-guided tours. There's different areas around the property that have historic photos and little write-ups and things to give you some more detailed information about the different areas. So feel free to kind of roam around. We have lots of little papers asking you to watch your step because there are a lot of uneven surfaces around the property, so just be careful. And then we are opening up the main floor of the home for some guided tours. We have some historical displays in there and some other really great photos. But we can only let a handful of people in at a time, so we'll just kind of get you through as quickly as we can. And yeah.
Suzanne, our raffle coordinator.
Yes. Suzanne is in charge of our raffle prizes. We have 8 different raffle prizes located over back here on the table if you're interested in taking part in that. The tickets are $5 a ticket or 5 for $20 if you'd like to do that. We're going to draw tickets at 2 o'clock. So, and then we have water and snacks back near the raffle as well. And then the Gypsy Mitten Cafe. She is back by the carriage house with delicious coffee and treats if you're interested in something different. And yes, Mark Putnam, author in house, has written a book about the Moore House. And we have that over near our merchandise table, which we have lots of different items of merchandise for sale if you're interested. You can chat with Mark over there, take a look at his book. He also has written a second book, The Cass River, and he's got that as well if you're interested in learning a little bit about that.
Thank you all.
And then I think that's it. Yes, the volunteers, all the volunteers that have helped us.